before we go further, I want to just acknowledge the inherent limitation contained within words and concepts and images, right? Again, in this case, the map is not the territory, right? It doesn't matter how well the map has been designed. It doesn't matter how intricate the map is. It will never, ever be the territory itself. Yeah. So in other words, again, I want to encourage you to look beyond the words, to look beyond the concept, look beyond the thought only. Yeah, because what we're pointing out with these principles are invisible facts, which of course create a challenge because they are at work, they are at play, even in this moment right now, but they're invisible. Which, to see that which is invisible requires a different kind of sight, if you will. This is what we call insight. Yes? And the way that Sid Banks put it is that wisdom is not learned. You can't learn it like 2 + 2 = 4. It's not a information, right? Wisdom is not learned. It is unfolded within one's own consciousness. And when such knowledge appears to a person, it is revealed in a form that some may call an insight. Yeah, an insight, to see from within, to see something within yourself. Yeah. So, don't get too caught up with the words. See if you can look beyond it. And as D.T. Suzuki, a Zen author, put it so eloquently, he said that to point at the moon, a finger is needed. But woe to those who take the finger for the moon. Yeah. As soon as you see the finger pointing to the moon, which is essentially what all of the words that you're about to hear are attempting to do, right? Don't get caught up with the finger. Look for the moon. Yeah. And lastly, another Zen proverb is that teachers open the door, but you must enter by yourself. Yeah. In this way, all genuine wisdom teachings, enlightenment teachings, teachings into the true nature of our experience, they're actually teachings that can never really be shared. There's a certain aspect or quality of them that is always inviting the listener or the student to see beyond the word and look within to what is being pointed at. Yeah, because all we're doing is recognizing something that already is. Recognizing something that doesn't need to be created, but is actually creating. All right. With that being said, what are principles? Let's just start very simple and basic and move from there. Yeah. What are principles? A lot of times when I say the word principle, a lot of people get this idea of principles being a belief system or a set of rules, right? A set of values. And in this context, principles actually is referring to something fundamentally different than rules and so on and so forth. So I'd like to define it for you so we're all on the same page. Yeah. So a principle in this context is essentially a foundational universal truth or law of nature that explains how something works. Yeah. A foundational universal truth or law of nature that explains how something happens or works. All right? And there's some qualities, some general qualities that all genuine principles share. For one, a principle is constant. So think of gravity, right? Laws of nature is synonymous with a principle in this case. So a principle is constant like gravity. It's always present, whether you think about it or don't think about it, whether you are aware of it or not, believe in it or not. It's constant. It is always at play. right? Next, it's also universal, meaning it applies to everyone. So like gravity, it doesn't matter if you're a kind person or a mean person, a rich person or a poor person. If you step off of a building, you're going to fall. Yeah, that applies to everyone, right? A principle also explains, as I said, how something works. So think physics. And this is what's so profoundly different about what we're exploring, is that we're not exploring what I would say 99% of self-help, personal development, and spiritual teachings as well are doing, which is giving you answers to how you should live your life, right? We're not looking at how you should live your life. We're looking at how does life work. Yeah, so principles explain, like physics, how something works. And lastly, it has a predictable nature. It has an inevitable aspect to it, right? Again, if you drop something, it's always going to fall to the ground. It's not going to suddenly fall up to the sky, right? So gravity is always at play. And like gravity, these principles are constant, universal. They explain how the human experience works, and they are predictable in nature. Yeah, so let's look at them a little more closely. So the three principles of universal mind, consciousness, and thought could be said to be a description, a description of the forces that are creating our entire experience of life moment to moment. Yeah, notice I highlighted description because, again, the three principles don't tell us how to live our lives. They're not a prescription for our life, but merely a description. And that description itself, when recognized and realized insightfully in your own experience, has profound implications, vast and profound implications. So the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought are a description of the invisible forces that are creating our entire experience of life moment to moment. They're a description, another way of looking at them is that they are a description of how the mind actually works. Yeah. And lastly, they're a description of the true source of well-being, as well as how it gets obscured. Yeah, as well as how it gets lost, essentially, quote unquote lost, because it's never really lost, but seemingly lost. Yeah. So let's break it down. We're going to break each one of these principles down to get, again, a sense of what these principles really are. So we're going to start with the principle of universal mind. Now, when I say mind, a lot of people immediately think of their own mental processing. It's this like container of thoughts. But when we talk about universal mind, we're pointing at something vastly different and much more profound, than our little minds. So the principle of mind, the way that we're using it in this context, is essentially the source and intelligence behind all of life. And there are many, many words that have been used to describe the principle of mind, including God, Spirit, the divine, the fertile void, impersonal mind, the universe, the allness, the great mystery, the oneness, and so on and so forth. In truth, it really actually doesn't matter what you call it, because it doesn't change what it is. Yeah. You could say that the principle of mind is infinite possibility and pure potential that exists beyond time, it exists beyond space, it exists beyond matter, beyond concepts, beyond thoughts, beyond all limitations. Yeah. And it also happens to be the source of all wisdom and love within you, because you are not separate from this intelligence, it's the very substance, Yeah, the source and the substance of life itself. And we're not separate from that. We can imagine we are. But in reality, we're never separate from this intelligence. This intelligence is always at play. And we're just going to stop to pause and reflect on this just a moment, because it's important that we recognize how this really looks like in our direct experience. Yeah. So it doesn't take actually a tremendous leap of observation to notice that there is an intelligence that is animating life, that is making the planets, keeping the planets in rotation, that's telling essentially the plants when to bloom, when to hibernate, go into slumber for the winter, the seasons and the changes of the seasons. What tells an acorn, it makes an acorn turn into an oak tree, right? This intelligence, like when you're out in nature, you can see it so clearly. It's unbeatable. You pick up a leaf, and if you inspect it, you'll just see the intricate detail that has gone into everything. It's just, it's profound intelligence. And the beautiful thing is that it's also active in you. Take a moment to simply notice right now. Is your heart beating? And are you doing that? Notice that your heart is beating. And you're not actually the one responsible for that. It's beating seemingly on its own. Notice also that this whole time that I've been talking and sharing with you, that you've been breathing. Were you doing that consciously? Notice that your lungs are functioning. There are thousands of chemical reactions occurring in this very moment within your body. Your blood is circulating. Your neurons are firing. Yeah. Your eyes are blinking. I want you to notice just even the smallest of things here. You're not doing any of that. There is seemingly an intelligence that is sustaining you, that is actually providing this sense of aliveness within you. Yeah, it's like this life force that is animating everything and everyone. So take a moment to recognize this. Take a moment to notice that there is an intelligence that is beyond your intellect, that is at play and sustaining you, and that is also at play behind all that is. Yeah. All that is. Take a moment to just look in that direction of that which is beyond anything you know, beyond our understanding, and yet palpable and alive. So this is the principle of universal mind. It is the source and intelligence of all that is. It is the very substance of life and living. And life simply would not be without this intelligence at play. So let's keep going further. Let's explore the principle of consciousness. And the principle of consciousness is essentially pure awareness. And it's been called by many things as well. Yeah, it's been called home, the place where we feel most at home, where it's been called our essence, our beingness, our soul, the silent witness, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And in essentially the principle of consciousness is that which allows us to be aware of life. So whereas mind is the principle of life itself, yeah, the intelligence behind all of life, The only way that we could even know that we exist is because of consciousness. Consciousness is what allows us to be aware of life, allows us to be aware of existence, and allows us to be aware that we're aware. Another way of describing consciousness is that it is that which everything appears to. It's that which everything appears to. Yeah. So notice right now. Yeah. Notice what is appearing in front of you. Notice that everything is appearing to you. Yeah. Even the images you have of yourself are appearing to, quote unquote, you. And the infamous question of who am I? Yeah. Ultimately dissolves into consciousness, into this recognition of awareness itself as who and what you really are. Now, the principle of consciousness is essentially the impersonal, changeless, still, silent space within. It's this space where all thoughts arise and subside, where all thoughts come and go. Okay? It's like the screen, if you will, like in a movie theater, where the screen itself, any kind of movie will play on that screen, right? Whether it's a horror film or a romantic comedy. All film is allowed, but the screen fundamentally never changes, right? And like this metaphor, consciousness is the backdrop, the screen of our lives. Everything appears and disappears in consciousness. Yeah. Another aspect of consciousness is because it is eternally present. Yeah. It's involuntary. You are aware. Yeah. You are aware. And at no point do you actually stop being aware. It is an innate quality of your true nature. Yeah. And oftentimes when we say, well, I fell out of an awareness, or I was unaware, what we tend to overlook is that how would we even know that if awareness wasn't present to notice this so-called state of being unaware? So awareness, it's fundamentally, another way to describe consciousness is the now. Yeah. And to go even closer to that, to this experience, if you will, of now, what it really is. Because it's not a place and time. It's not a conceptual spot between the past and the future. Yeah. The now could be described as this moment minus our thoughts about it. Yeah. This moment minus your thoughts about it. So take a moment, let's pause and reflect on this principle of consciousness. Notice that in this very moment you are aware. And just ask yourself, just to make sure, are you aware? Yes, of course you are. And what is listening to these words right now? What is hearing? What is seeing? What is everything appearing to? Take a moment to slow down enough to notice the fact of consciousness, that you are aware, that you exist, that you are aware of what is here and now. All right. And from this awareness, let's look at the principle of thought. Yeah. And the principle of thought isn't actually your thought content. Yeah. It's actually the ability to think itself. So it's not what we think, which is personal, And there's a tremendous variability, right? What we think is what we could call personal thinking. Yeah, it's what makes up our quote-unquote separate realities. Yeah. But it's not that. It's not what we think, but that we think, which is impersonal. It's universal. We're all utilizing the gift of thought, yeah, to create realities. Yeah. So the principle of thought could be described as the formless creative energy out of which we construct the full range of the human experience. So, mental images, concepts, meanings, ideas, perceptions, duality itself, problems, solutions, beliefs, opinions, judgments, and language itself, and so on and so forth. All of these things are made up of thought. Yeah. When you look at that and you start looking and getting a sense of how many aspects, like actually literally the whole spectrum, of the human experience is being created by this invisible power called thought. And this invisible power of thought is what is creating everything that you feel. It's simultaneous. In a way, you could say we have thought feelings, not really just thoughts, but thought feelings, right? They arise simultaneously. And as Sid Banks put it, thought is not reality, yet it is through thought that our realities are created. So take a moment to just tune into this principle of thought that's always at play, not what you're thinking. Again, it's not looking at, well, what is the content of my thinking? It's looking at the fact that you're thinking. And that your experience or your felt experience, your feelings, are being sourced from whatever thought you're holding in mind. As the content or the what, your personal thinking, as that varies and shifts, so does your feeling. So take a moment to pause and reflect. Again, coming back to essentially what we're talking about here is thought recognition. See if you can recognize that you're thinking. And that that's not actually personal. That you're thinking everyone is doing. And as you tune into that, let's just go a little bit deeper to see how this all comes together. Yeah. Mind, consciousness, and thought are essentially the building blocks that allow for our right now experience. And it so happens that it is always a right now experience. Always. And this is what waking up to thought and waking up to the principles essentially reveals. Is that mind can be seen as the fact that you're alive, right? I'm alive. There is an intelligence behind everything that is. There's an intelligence that is functioning within my body that is beyond my understanding, that is sustaining me, keeping me alive. This intelligence is also within my own mind. There's actually no line between your mind and this mind that we're talking. We're not talking about two minds. It is only one mind. And it can be evidence as the mere fact that you exist. And not only that, but the only way you could possibly know you exist is because you're aware. Notice this. Notice that you're alive, you're aware, which is the principle of consciousness and action in this very moment, and you can think. And you can think anything, literally anything. take a moment to slow down to notice that this is the fundamental aspect of your right now experience. That even if for a moment, if we were to say, take out awareness, and you only had mind and thought, there would be nothing that could possibly be aware of such a thing. Therefore, you would not be experiencing anything. If you were to take out mind, the intelligence of life, the existence itself, obviously there would be nothing to be aware of or even think about. And if you were to take out thought, and you would only have mind and consciousness, there would actually be nothing to be conscious of. Mind, consciousness, and thought are universal, they are impersonal, and they are neutral. And how we use these gifts of mind, consciousness, and thought is essentially how we experience our life. And because they are neutral, you can utilize mind, consciousness, and thought to create horrible experiences, quote unquote horrible, right? Painful, suffering-like experiences. And utilizing the same principles, you can create joyous, blissful, abundant experiences. Yeah. It's all in how we're using these gifts. And to summarize it in the most succinct way that I can in this moment is essentially to notice that all experience is thought coming into form in the moment and is brought to life by consciousness. Yeah. Consciousness is what makes the thought appear real in your system through your senses. And of course, all made possible by existence, by mind. Yeah. In any moment, in every single moment. See, the implication of the principles, what they're revealing, is that we're always experiencing thought coming to life via our consciousness. In other words, consciousness is always and only experiencing thought coming into form. Yeah. And there's something powerful, something transformative that occurs when we really get a recognition and an insight around this, a realization around this. Because suddenly it's not people, it's not circumstances, it's not situations, it's not the future, it's not the past that we're experiencing in the moment. None of these things are creating our experience. That actually our experience is coming from whatever thought we're holding in mind, whatever thought is coming into form and being brought to life by our own consciousness. It's all happening within you. Now, what you start to discover and uncover is what one of my teachers once put it in this way. A doctor by the name of Jack Pransky said that all we are is peace, love, and wisdom, and the power to create the illusion that we are not. That power to create the illusion that we are not is thought. Because the moment that thought, we wake up to the power of thought. What we wake up to essentially is our true nature of consciousness. And what we have going for us, which is this infinite creative potential and possibility of mind, which again is the source of all love, all wisdom, insight, and revelation.